Black Laws, the ninth edition. The word right. That which is proper under law, morality, or ethics. Something that is due to a person by just claim, legal guarantee, or moral principle. A power, privilege, or immunity secured to a person by law. A legally enforceable claim that another will do or will not do a given act. Black Laws, ninth edition, absolute right. A right that belongs to every human being, such as the right of personal liberty. A natural right. Black Laws, the ninth edition, inalienable right. A right that cannot be transferred or surrendered, especially a natural right such as the right to own property, also termed inherent right. Black Laws, ninth edition, legal right. This is a right created or recognized by law. Black Laws, the ninth edition, natural right. This is a right that is conceived as part of natural law, and that is therefore thought to exist independently of rights created by government or society, such as the right to life, liberty, and property. When we look into Black Laws, the ninth edition, under the word legal right, we find that a legal right is a right that has been created by law, or it is a right that is recognized by law. So a legal right breaks down in two ways. It is a right that's created by law, or it is a right that is recognized by law. So law didn't create it, but they recognize it. Now, absolute right, when you look into legal definitions, legal terminology, this describes, or this means, rights which belong to every human being. So an absolute right are rights that belong to every human being. Then they qualify it a bit more. They say natural rights. Now, when you look at the word natural rights, you see the following, that these are rights which are part of natural law. And these natural rights, they exist independently of rights created by the government or society. So natural rights exist, and they're not created by the government or by society. So here we see that legal rights are created by law, so by the government, by the justice system. So legal rights created by law, the government or the justice system, and then natural rights exist independently of the government or society, and are not created by the government or society. So these rights, these natural rights that exist independently, are recognized, a recognized legal right. They're not created by government, but yet they exist. It's an absolute right that every human being has in natural law, and they're not created by government, yet they're recognized. So they can come into being a legal right. Legal rights, then, are therefore either created or are recognized by law or by the justice system. Now, legal rights that are created, they are created by law, i.e. through the justice system, the Parliament of Canada, the legislators of Canada, through the enactments and regulations. That is how these rights and duties are created. Now, recognized, we have absolute rights. Remember, as human beings, we have absolute rights. In fact, they are inalienable rights. They are part of us and can never be removed. These are our natural rights. Now, notice the description that Black Laws gives in 9th edition. Actually, when you're talking about natural rights, rights, if you will say, that are under common law, you're going to notice that it always follows this type of description. Now, in Black Laws 9th, as I shared with you, it says such as, natural rights, such as the right to life. They articulate it, they enlist it, they enumerate it. Liberty and property. So these are natural rights. Natural rights such as life, liberty, and property. Now, where else do we see this type of reasoning or type of writing? Here in Canada. When we look in the Constitution Act of Canada, 1982, Article 7. You guys should be familiar with that article of law by now, where it says everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except with the principles of fundamental justice. So, when we look into the Constitution Act 1982, and they're enumerating life, liberty, and security of the person, and then we come to an understanding that these rights here, life, liberty, and security of the person, are actually natural rights. It's not hard to make that connection. They say, oh, geez, so in Article 7, they're referring to natural rights alone. And these natural rights, they belong to human beings. Well, when we see the justice system, that article that I read for you, it states that Article 7 of the Constitution Act 1982 only applies to human beings and not to corporate figures or artificial entities, those legal persons. They state that Article 7 only refers to human beings, not to the legal person. We understand what's being enumerated there, what's being listed there are natural rights. Life, liberty, and property. So these natural rights of life, liberty, and property, they're actually a legal right that we can claim to, that we can lay hold upon, because this legal right is recognized in law. The Constitution Act of Canada, 1982, Article 7. Now first look at what this is titled. Legal rights. You see that? Legal rights. Article 7. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Justice Canada. Graham Gratton. Everyone. Read as a whole, it appears that Section 7 of the Constitution Act of Canada 1982 was intended to confer protection on a singularly human level. A plain, common sense reading of the phrase, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, serves to underline the human element involved. Only human beings can enjoy these rights. Everyone, then, must be read in the light of the rest of the section and defined to exclude corporations and other artificial entities incapable of enjoying life, liberty, or security of the person, and include only human beings. Again, just to briefly run it down, looking at natural rights, these are rights that are absolute and they're inalienable. They're part of who we are as human beings. Now, when they give us what natural rights are, when they try to teach us or bring forth what a natural right is, they use the example of life, liberty, and property. We go into the Canadian Constitution Act of Canada and we see Article 7 is an expression, it's an expression of natural rights here in Canada. And Article 7 of this Constitution Act of Canada applies only to the human beings. So they're well aware of the fact that in Article 7, natural rights have been brought in. More than just that, but just showing you the connection. So through this article now, Constitution Act of Canada, Article 7, this became a legal right. For who? Incorporated person, the artificial person, the citizen of Canada, the man or the woman. I don't know who does it affect. Who do you think it affects? This is natural rights, natural law being expressed here. The justice system specifically states that this verse, this article of law applies only to human beings. Yet it is a legal right. Is it not? It was titled under Article 7 of the Constitution Act, and it expressed legal rights. Well, we just learned tonight that legal rights are what? They are rights that are created or rights that are recognized. So these rights here to life, liberty, and security of the person are recognized, and it is a legal right that a human being can stand under. Now we're going to look at the flip side of this, the right but created by the government, and how they're applying this upon the individuals that are living here in Canada. The Constitution Act of Canada, 1867, better known as the British North American Act. Article 9, executive power. This means controlling power, ruling power. The executive government and authority. You know what that word authority means? Over Canada is hereby declared to continue to be vested in the Queen. So the executive government and authority of and over Canada is hereby declared to be continued and be vested in the Queen. Black Laws, 9th edition. Vested right. A right that so completely and definitely belongs to a person that it cannot be impaired or taken away without the person's consent. Oath of allegiance. An oath of allegiance is an oath whereby a subject or citizen acknowledges a duty of allegiance and swears loyalty to a monarch or country. Allegiance is a duty of fidelity said to be owed by a subject or citizen to his or her sovereign. Oath. Any type of attestation by which an individual signifies that he or she is bound in conscience to perform a particular act truthfully and faithfully. A solemn declaration of truth or obligation. Obligation. Canadian Citizenship Act or enactment. Oath or affirmation of citizenship. I swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, and that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen. Looking into the Constitution Act of Canada 1867, we find that the executive powers, the controlling powers, the ruling powers, the authority, has been vested in the Queen. That's what it declares. And we see that vested means that she has a vested right. She absolutely is considered the authority and the executive power here in Canada at that time in 1867. We learn further on through law that her successors claimed this right also. Now, through the Citizenship Act of Canada, we see that the individual is led to make a pledge, an oath of allegiance to the Queen. And they clearly define which Queen they're talking about. They say Queen Elizabeth II, and they title her the Queen of Canada. Now, this Queen Elizabeth II is a living being. She is an individual, she is a human being, she went through a coronation, she is a living being. Now, through this oath of allegiance, this produces duties and obligations, and actually puts binds upon us, or upon that subject, that citizen, Canadian citizen. Through that oath of allegiance, you have said with your tongue, with your words, that I promise to bear true allegiance to her, the Queen, to be faithful to her successors, to her heirs, and to obey the laws of Canada, and to fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen. So to obey the laws of Canada. Now we looked at laws here in Canada. There are laws that are created, rights, duties that are created by the government, and there are rights and duties that exist that are not created by the government. But still, so as a Canadian citizen, we have declared now that we will obey the law and that we will be subject and a servant of Her Majesty. This is a federal enactment. It's called the Civil Marriage Act. Some of you may be familiar with it. Civil Marriage Act. Now notice this. Now, therefore, Her Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons of Canada, enacts as follows. This is another federal enactment. It's designated or called the Tobacco Act. Now, look. Therefore, Her Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons of Canada, enacts as follows. So taking an oath to the Queen produces the obligation, my allegiance towards her. Now, as you saw in the enactments, in the regulations that I shared with you, it says, Her Majesty therefore enacts, with the advice and consent of the House of Commons and the Senate, the following laws. So Her Majesty enacts laws. So Her Majesty creates laws. She creates, she gives force, laws which give rights and duties. Now, these laws are enforced upon, or these laws are then enforced, these laws, on her subjects and servants. So they create these laws, or she creates these laws, Her Majesty enacts them, then they apply them upon the subject and servant of Her Majesty, not the human being. You see, Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, Canada, the Crown, they don't have the right to bypass our natural rights. And one of our natural rights that any of us can understand without having to read international covenants or Constitution Act of Canada is that no one can force us into servitude or slavery. We know that. It's part of our heart. We understand that. I won't try and force someone to be my slave, neither would I want them to come and try and force me to be their slave or their servant. That's part of natural rights. In 1976, Canada became a signatory to the International Covenants on Human Rights. Now, these International Covenants on Human Rights was an expression, or part of an expression, of natural law. Remember, we just spoke about the fact that no one should be able to force you into slavery, neither should I be able to force someone else into slavery. Well, this is articulated, enumerated, listed within the covenants. It's a right, a natural right that has been recognized, that says that no man can force us to be their servant, can force us to be their subject. This is a natural right that we have. Now, being signatory to these covenants, it produced an obligation upon Canada to ensure, protect, and respect these natural rights that were enumerated in the covenants. If you've watched some of my videos, you understand that the covenants themselves said to Canada that these rights and freedoms that are expressed here in our covenants must find their expression in the Constitution Act of your country. And that's why in 1982, Canada redid their Constitution Act. They had the obligation to include the rights that are included in the international covenants into the Constitution Act of Canada. And that part was natural law. And then we flip it around now. We go back to Article 7. Remember, we read we're the justice system, and everyone knows that these rights of life, liberty, and security of the person only apply to human beings. So while before, in the Constitution Act of Canada 1867, there was not any natural law, natural rights being recognized. When they redid it, the Constitution Act in 1982, they then had to recognize, or had to bring forth, give effect, protect, respect the natural law that the covenants were bringing forth. And they did. There's more than just Article 7. I just used this as a primary example for tonight.